It was the most spectacular day the people had ever experienced. After 430 years of sojourning in Egypt, and several generations of the descendants of Jacob having endured the bondage of slavery, the people were finally free. What an unforgettable night it had been. At midnight, no matter where anyone lived in Egypt, they could hear a loud, horrible collective cry throughout the land, as thousands and thousands of people discovered a family member who had died because their household had ignored God's instructions for how their lives could be spared. Not long after that, men were running through the streets of Israel's villages, yelling to everyone, "We're leaving! We're leaving! Take everything with you! We're leaving!" And all at once, a couple of million people throughout the land of Egypt were traveling down the main thoroughfares with carts and animals and everything they owned, all headed out of Egypt. The people of Egypt were lining the streets as if they were watching a parade, practically throwing all kinds of provisions at the departing Israelites: clothing, blankets, jewelry, and food. The people of Israel had heard the promises of this day their entire lives. Many of them had given up hope of ever seeing this day. Then Moses showed up and made the people believe again. And now it seemed that it really was happening. They were still traveling when the sun came up. And even though it had been a very busy night, nobody wanted to sleep. As they kept moving forward, they could hear the voices of people in the crowd praising the Lord God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Others were praying. Some were singing as they went. There were a few grumblers. Everyone was aware that there were some Egyptians in the crowd who just jumped into the caravan for the excitement or for a change of scenery. But the people who loved Jehovah, the people whose faith was strong, they knew that there were many others just like themselves, and they knew that God was among them. Those people with strong faith were paying attention to every detail. This was a day they would be talking about for the rest of their lives, and they didn't want to miss a thing. They looked ahead of them and behind them, and as far as their eyes could see in both directions, the pathway was filled with the families of the children of Jacob. They looked up in the sky and saw in front of them a very large, distinct cloud that was traveling with them. In fact, it seemed to be leading them. Then in the evening, the strangest thing happened. The cloud stopped moving, and as the sky grew darker, the large, distinct cloud gradually transformed from a cloud to a flame. As they traveled by day and camped by night, the cloud led them as they moved forward, and the flame lit the camp for everyone as they slept. For many of the people, this was the first time in their lives they had known such a peaceful calm. The pillar in the sky eventually led them to the shores of the Red Sea, and it was a beautiful place to make camp. What none of the people knew was that after they had left Egypt, Pharaoh had changed his mind about letting them go. He had gotten his army together, and he was leading 600 chariots with horses and soldiers into the wilderness to pursue the children of Israel. It was while they were camped for the night on the shores of the Red Sea that Pharaoh and his army caught up with them. The beautiful, peaceful evening was interrupted by shouts throughout the camp. "Look! Look!" Men pointed behind them at the approaching Egyptians. A panic swept through the Israelite camp. Some were crying, others were praying, and far too many people were shouting at Moses, complaining that this was all his fault. Moses declared to the camp, "Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace." Everyone watched Moses to see what he would do next. For just a moment, he seemed to be talking to the Lord. Then suddenly, Moses turned and faced the water, and raised the rod in his hand high over his head. A fierce wind began to blow, wind like they'd never experienced before in their lives. And as the people watched in astonishment, the waters of the Red Sea began to part, like two great tidal waves rolling away from each other, one to the left and the other to the right. In between the walls of water was a wide path of dry ground. Everyone grabbed their things and filed into the canyon of water, making their way to the other side of the sea. The pillar of fire moved in between the Israelites and the Egyptians, providing light for the Israelites, but making darkness for the Egyptian army. The Israelites moved forward all night long, and every one of them made it safely to the other side. The Egyptian army followed them on their path through the sea, and as they made their way through, the wheels began to come off their chariots, and the soldiers began to collide. Moses stood on the other shore, turned and faced the Egyptians, and once again raised the rod in the air. When he did, the waters crashed on the Egyptians, wiping out their entire army. The children of Israel feared and praised God. They knew that the Lord was with them and that Moses was God's man. Christian, God always makes a way for those who are truly following him. Stay the course.